What's up YouTube, I'm Mike, and today I'm going to revisit a topic that I've discussed quite a few times on this channel, and that is the effects that steroid cycles have on women. My wife has come on here and talked about her own personal effects, the pros, the cons, and everything, but we sort of ran into a problem relatively recently that made me kind of second guess some of our opinions on the matter. So I wanted to be, I like to be as transparent as possible with all of our effects so that, people who are watching this channel can make their own decisions and decide what they want to do with their bodies, what they want to do with their relationships, etc. That being said, this video is going to touch on some sexual topics and some sexual body parts. So this is not safe for work, and it's not, you probably don't want your kids around while you're listening to it. So that being said, what we're talking about is things that you should be aware of before you and or your girl decide to cycle together. So obviously this, if you're a lady and you're watching this, this video is going to be informational and important for you. Guys, if you're like me and you're with a girl who's into lifting and you kind of are wanting her to go down the anabolic steroid pathway, these are some things that you should take into consideration before you decide whether you want to push in that direction. One of the things that is commonly talked about in my videos and all of the videos online is what hormones are female safe. What my wife and I have discovered over the past several years is that the true answer to that is that none of them are female safe. There are certainly certain compounds and certain doses of compounds that you can run relatively safely that will not have really catastrophic effects very rapidly. But what we have learned firsthand is that duration of exposure really matters. So Derek has talked about this. A lot of different people have talked about that. You can do different things, but if you think as a woman that you're going to be able to run anabolic steroids and have zero effects, I am here to tell you you are absolutely wrong. And anyone who tells you that you can is almost certainly wrong. That being said, obviously I want to clarify, everyone's body's different. So just because my wife had certain effects that I'm going to talk about today does not mean that she'll have the same effects. They could be not at all, or they could be far worse than what she experienced. So that all being said, let's just get straight to it. The first thing that happens regardless, in my opinion, regardless of dose or duration, right out the gate, the first time she ran Anavar, I noticed an immediate change in her personality. Within a few days, you start to notice the difference. These are more or less male hormones. Now, I know some people are going to say, well, that's not true, and I might have been one of those people in the past. Most all women have testosterone in their bodies. If you're not perimenopausal or postmenopausal, then you have some amount of testosterone in your body. The thing that matters the most, however, and it's the same thing that's true of guys, when we go and we attempt to do hormone replacement therapy, you're really never getting a natural amount of testosterone, because when you're imparting it exogenously, your free testosterone is almost always going to be higher than it otherwise would be with your own natural production. So even if your number on that chart is, say, 800 nanograms per deciliter and you fall well within the range, almost certainly your total to free is going to be skewed in an unnatural way. This becomes very important to women because it's that free testosterone, because you're going to get more DHT conversion. And the DHT is what's going to cause a lot of the negative effects. It's not the only thing that's going to cause negative effects, but it's one of the factors. So right out the gate, you're going to notice a change in her personality. If she's typically very bubbly, giggly, kind of lighthearted like a lot of girls tend to be, you're going to see very rapidly some of that come down. You're going to see a change in her demeanor. She's going to be a lot more sort of masculine. That was not a problem for me. I have never had a problem with it. And this is, again, is my personal opinion. I feel that women tend to be more emotional in the way they view the world, in the way they view interpersonal relationships, in most everything, compared to men. Men typically are more analytical, more black and white, less emotional. And you will likely see that if your girl starts taking steroids, some of her demeanor, some of her attitude, some of the way she views the world will change. Now, like I said, for me, that was a positive. I kind of prefer her to view the world more like I do, to come at things more like I do. But if you think that the steroids are going to turn her psychologically into a man, you're wrong, because she's still going to have the estrogen and the progesterone and all of these other things in massively different amounts than you are. And at the end of the day, and I know this is going to be an unpopular opinion with some people, it's already gotten me in trouble on Twitter, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you have two X chromosomes, genetically you're a woman, and there's not really anything you can do about that. And if you have an X and a Y chromosome, then genetically you're a man, and you can change your hormones, and you can change the clothes you wear, you can do all of these various things, but it's not going to change your DNA, and your DNA is responsible for the vast majority of who you are and how you behave. So at any dose, even 5 milligrams of Anavar a day, you will almost certainly see a general change in your girl's demeanor. Number 2, and this is what ended up being the clincher for us, hair growth. Your girl's hair growth patterns are almost certainly going to change. Testosterone will likely lead to this more than something like Anavar. My wife used Anavar in doses as high as 10 milligrams a day, along with testosterone and nanthate in doses as high as 7 milligrams a week. So that DHT conversion is going to lead to a change in her hair patterns and the volume of hair growth. We knew this going in, but I'm going to kind of get to what happened. So before we got married, she had laser hair removal. Now, my wife is a lucky woman. She's a blonde. Her hair is very light. It's very fine. She didn't ever have a lot of body hair the way someone maybe of an Italian descent or who has darker colored hair, coarser hair. Obviously, everybody's different. She didn't have a lot of natural hair to begin with, and after she got her laser hair removal, she had none. Most importantly, in the pubic and genital areas, she had no hair. She might shave once a week just to grab a stray hair. Laser hair removal is not perfect, and obviously over time some things can come back, but more or less she was hairless. We understood that hormones were going to cause her to grow more hair and that she would have to shave more frequently. In the beginning, this was not a problem. I never really noticed any of her body hair change tremendously, for the most part. Her leg hair, her armpit hair, I didn't notice this because obviously she shaved as much as was necessary. So she went from shaving once a week, and I don't remember the numbers, but she began having to shave quite a bit more frequently. What did become a problem is the hair growth in her genital area far outpaced her hair growth anywhere else. And it got so bad, I made a video not long ago about how we've been having so much sex and my penis was like literally chafed to the point that I felt injured, like I was having to put ointment on it to try to like heal it so that I could stay up with our activity. Over a period of time, what I started to figure out was that part of the reason I was experiencing this chafing was because she had grown so much hair in her genital area that there was like a couple of positions that we could do that wouldn't cause this hair to effectively feel like just teeth all around, like it just was shredding the skin on my penis. And so it got to the point where in order for us to have sex twice a day, which we typically do or did at that time, she would have to shave her genital area twice a day, every single day, or the hair growth would be enough that it would be very, very uncomfortable during sex. It would literally feel like sandpaper at times, and I would have to change the angle of approach to try to avoid this. This ultimately became such a problem. It was one of the major reasons that some time ago she got off all of the hormones combined. So that's something that we were not expecting. We knew that there was going to be hair growth. It never occurred to me that the hair growth in that region could be so profound as to literally cause damage to me. And that's what happened. So it was remarkable. Like, I took some pictures. Obviously, I'm not ever going to show them on here, but I can tell you that we were talking about male. I imagine that if I went and got like a full Brazilian, this is gross to even say, but I imagine that if I did that and then let it go for a couple of days, I would look very similar to the way she looked like at the end of one day of no shaving. It was insane. The good news, however, is that it is getting better with time since she stopped taking anabolics. She still, I think, is shaving twice a day, or she's shaving at a minimum of once a day before sex to try to alleviate that, because, I mean, it literally feels like sandpaper. So be very, very aware of the hair growth. The rest of the body, like, she had additional hair growth, but it wasn't like she started growing a beard or anything like that. There was definitely more growth, and she definitely had to shave, shave daily. And that was after not having to shave, but except maybe once a week. So definitely something that you're going to consider if you ever decide to go down this pathway. We still don't know how long lasting this is going to be. I don't know if she stays off, if it will ever return to normal. She may have to go get more laser hair removal just to try to get back to some level of normalcy. Normalcy, is that a word? Where she's not having to shave every day to keep from shredding my penis. So down that vein, there, and along with the what I was talking about with the personality change, with the longer duration of exposure, there does become just a sense of manliness about a girl who's using steroids. It comes on very slowly. It's not going to happen overnight. And so, like, voice change, for example, her voice definitely changed some while she was on cycle. We wouldn't notice it until, like, I would play a video that she was speaking in, and then I would look at a video from like 2 years prior. And we're not talking about like multiple octaves, but there is an audible change in the sound of her voice. Now, I think also that is starting to remedy itself to some degree, but again, it's very hard to tell objectively when you live with a person and the changes come on slowly and then they go away slowly. So it's really hard to dial in, but if you're taking testosterone and Anavar, especially together, you can pretty much guarantee that your voice is going to change to some degree if you run it long enough. Now, I know there's going to be people in the comment section who will be like, I took 10 milligrams and I didn't have any voice change. Okay, well, did you do it for fucking 3 years? Because my girl was on for almost 3 years consistently. She would take these little breaks, but rarely would they be more than like 4 weeks off, and then she would be back on something, whether it was just testosterone replacement or, or some amount of Anavar or something. Aggression, along with that manliness to the attitude, there's going to be a heightened level of aggression. And you will definitely notice that in your conflicts. So in the way that you may appreciate the fact that all of a sudden she's a little bit more manly in her demeanor, she's coming at the world from a more similar perspective to you, you will also see her be more aggressive in her conflicts with you. She's going to be less likely to have a fight and end up in a ball of tears, and much more likely to be standing toe to toe with you like, come on, motherfucker, you want to go? Let's fucking go. Like, we would battle it out, and there would be a definitive difference in how aggressive she could be with her entire approach to an argument. Some of the positive things, obviously, because this sounds like a downer, I imagine, is that there's definitely a change in sexual appetite. For my wife, it didn't come so much with the testosterone alone or the Anavar alone, but the two combined had her sex drive higher than I have ever seen it in life, higher than I ever thought it would be. To illustrate how strong her sex drive was, this is a girl who had little to no sex drive prior to hormones, like she admitted in one of my previous videos. At the end of this video, I'll link 2 of the videos that she made with me so that you can, if you haven't seen those, you can catch up. So by her own admission, she had very little to no sex drive to begin with. She's sleeping with a man who has an out of control sex addict level of sex drive naturally. And then you throw 1,000 milligrams of steroids, including Tren on top of the mix, and some Cialis, and everything else, and I'm like a fucking wild animal in this house. So, when I'm chasing her 3 times a day on average, or twice a day on average, during a cycle, and sometimes she's the one chasing me, this illustrates how massively it changed her sex drive. Sometimes she was wanting it more than I did. Or if something happened, like I got sick for a week and we missed a couple of days, she was in bed while I was sick trying to get a piece, and that has never happened in our relationship before. If I got sick or anything happened, it was just like we'd go a week without having sex because she wasn't that pent up for it. But on those level of hormones, the sexual aggression was definitely there. She was much more likely to look at pornography, whether with me or on her own. We were doing OnlyFans. There was a lot of sexuality in this house, and it definitely came as a result of the combination of test and Anavar. Along with that sexual aggression comes physical changes in the form of clitoral growth. Her clitoris definitely grew irrevocably from these hormones. Now the good news for her, and actually for me, is that, and this is a lot of personal information, but she's usually comfortable with me sharing it, when we first got together, I thought that, like, she comes from a very, very strict religious background. I thought that her parents might have been one of these lunatics that, like, had their daughter's clit forcibly removed. I couldn't find it at all. Like, it was nearly non-existent. And so that, I think, played a major role in her lack of sexual desire. For most women, the clitoris is like 70% of the game or more. And so if it never gets engorged, if it never is like kind of like steps into the playing field, then obviously that's going to have some negative effects on libido and desire. When she started using the androgens, her clit really grew from non-existent to slightly bigger than normal. But with that increase in volume became an increase in sensitivity. Now what's interesting is that the hormones and the change in size of her clitoris seemed to move her G-spot, which is really strange. So typically for my wife, she primarily enjoys clitoral stimulation, and her G-spot, her internal G-spot was barely inside. Like, I could get her off with like almost a practically limp penis. Like, it took very tiny amount of penetration to reach a spot that was sexually gratifying for her. For some strange reason, as she started using steroids and her clit enlarged, her G-spot seemed to travel inward, and suddenly she was preferring deeper penetration to get the stimulation that she wanted from penetration. So obviously the clit was still, you know, the fucking lead actor here. That's still primarily where all of the sensitivity is. But the sensitivity that she liked internally seemed to move further inward than it had ever been. I have no idea what would cause that. It stumped us for the longest time. In fact, in the beginning, when she started using steroids, despite the fact that she had higher libido, she reported that her orgasms were weaker. And I don't know if that was just because we hadn't found the new spot yet, or it hadn't finished like migrating, or I don't know what caused it. I mean, obviously women are like impossible to figure out. Everyone's different. They're all keyed differently. No lock, no key will fit every lock. It's insane. And fucking with your hormones, if you've got your girl figured out, if you think you've dialed in what she wants, and you think that just giving her a little Anavar is going to make her want it more, you need to be prepared that you may have to learn this game all over again, because everything that works could literally change practically overnight. And then the final thing I think I'm going to talk about in this video was acne. This was one of the biggest things that she struggled with, that she really didn't like. With the low doses of Anavar, any amount of steroids caused her to have acne, which is really strange because she had very little to no acne naturally. Around her period, she might get a couple of spots, but as far as like chronic acne, she didn't have it at all prior to steroids. I had acne as a child very, very badly. When I was a teen, I got the big, huge cystic acne. It was all over my face. It was all over my back and shoulders, my chest. It was brutal. For some reason, I can run 1,500 milligrams of Anavar, I can run Anavar, every steroid on the planet, Tren in super high doses, and occasionally I'll have a couple of little pimples pop up. But for me, I have little to no acne problems on any amount of hormones, and I don't know why. For her, her face was very, very broken out. If you look at some of the older videos we made, you can see the large cystic acne. She would get it all over her back. She would occasionally get spots on her chest, and it would stay there and be a continuous problem the entire time she was on. It was so bad that she started taking Accutane, and I begged her to get off of the Accutane because it was making her look horrible, honestly. Like, her skin was so dry and bizarre looking. It was like it just added 10 years to her life within a few weeks or months. And so she got off all the Accutane and all the hormones, and right now we're both just kind of trying to reset and figure ourselves out from kind of what we're trying to do in life, because as you know, if you've been following this channel, we just bought an RV and we're about to do a ton of traveling. So I wanted to make this video because I always want to be transparent with you guys. I come on here and I sing the praises of a particular drug or a particular compound. I tell you all of the positives that it has, and I don't want to leave out, you know, the aftermath, because one of the things with hormones that can be very misleading is and this is for guys or girls. You start a cycle, say it's 500 milligrams a test, and you have next to no side effects. You gain muscle, you get strength. It just seems to be all positive. And so you get lulled into this sense, this false sense that, hey, you know, steroids are safe. They don't cause any problems. Look, I just did a cycle and everything was cool. And so maybe you add a little something extra to it. You know, you add an oral, you add a D-ball, or you add an Anavar, and you run it again, and you don't really have any problems. And so again, you're thinking, hey, everything's cool. This is a lot of what happened with my wife and I. Like, she would run cycles, she would have very minor effects, but cumulatively, over a period of time, if you look at where her body was at before steroids and where her body was at, you know, 2 or 3 years later, there's some pretty substantial changes. And we don't know how many of those changes are going to be permanent. So before I leave a bunch of videos out there saying, hey, go get your girl on test and Anavar, it's amazing, she's gonna have crazy libido, she's gonna fuck your brains out, she's gonna have chiseled abs and round shoulders, and it's all gonna be great. It's not all great. There are definitely problems. If you follow female bodybuilding at all, and I'm not talking about like open class bodybuilders, all the way at the bikini level. That bikini level, you will already see girls that are starting to have long-term masculinizing effects. It is very rare to see a girl who's been running steroids at any amount for any length of time, whose voice is not changed, whose facial structure is not changing, that you can't see and sense the masculinity there. So, as always, I want you guys to make informed decisions, conscientious decisions, before you push or advocate or suggest that your girl, your wife, whoever, start down this pathway. Please take all of these things into consideration, because it is very possible that once you get to a point where you're no longer comfortable with the changes, you may never be able to go back. I think a lot of this is going to subside, but it will never go back to normal. And so that's something that we'll both have to deal with, as we age, and I could make a whole other video about why we're not really terribly concerned about those effects, but I'll save that for later. So, as always, hopefully this has been informative. Hopefully you appreciate the honesty and candor, and that my wife is willing to let me talk about these things. Obviously, it's very personal information, but the whole point of this channel really was about harm reduction. I believe that we should be able to do things like Trenbolone in a safe way, in a conscientious way, understanding that there are a lot of positives to gain, but there's negatives. And you really need to know the negatives and understand that they are going to come. And then if you say, okay, this is still something I want to do, then you know that it's probably right for you. If you're going into this with the delusion that you're going to be able to have all the fun and pay no costs, then this is definitely not for you, because you will regret your decision if you think it's going to be risk-free. So there you have it. Hopefully this has been informative. Again, don't take any of this as medical advice. This is my experience and her experience alone. You don't have to get in the comments and tell me that I'm an idiot and that you went for 2 years and you didn't have any effects. You are very lucky. There are guys who can take lots of steroids and have no cholesterol problems. I have massive cholesterol problems. There's guys who have, you know, like me, I have massive cholesterol problems, no acne problems. And the guy next to me may be covered in acne and have perfectly good cholesterol. So you just can't know how these are going to affect you, and you need to go into it expecting the worst. So, as always, hopefully this has been informative, and we'll see you on the next one.